I'm Anna. Welcome to Books on the Go. I'm here today with summer reading recommendations, and I know some of you are lucky enough to be in winter at the moment, but it's very much summer here. It's hot today. It's like 35 degrees, and so it's time to read something, for me, a bit lighter, and often I'll read more crime over the summer holidays and things like that. So I've picked 4 books that I have read this year that I think work well for summer. The first one is a really good legal thriller called 13 by Steve Cavanagh. He is a lawyer in, I think, Northern Ireland, so he knows that world really well, and this is the 4th in a series about Eddie Flynn. So Eddie Flynn was a con artist, and he's now a really street smart criminal lawyer. So he's a great protagonist, and as the series goes on, you find out, you get to know him and find out a bit more about his personal life, but really fast-paced, page-turner sort of books. And this one, the premise is the serial killer isn't on trial, he's on the jury. So I just think that's a fantastic hook. Immediately you want to read it and find out what's happening. And it's really interesting because in the States, it's set in New York, and there's a whole industry about choosing your jury, and they have advisors, and there's another element to a criminal trial that we don't have as much here in Australia. So it's a fantastic, fast-paced, can't put down sort of book to read, and it's been doing really well. So I've been pleased to see how well it's been selling, because I've been following Steve Cavanagh because I listen to his podcast, Two Crime Writers and a Microphone with Luca Vesti. But it's nice to see this doing really well. And it's number 4, but you don't have to start at number 1. I think like most of these series, it doesn't depend on reading the earlier ones. So you could just pick up this one or start back at the earlier ones if you feel like it. So that's 13. And another crime, but very different, is, and I'm afraid this is just a proof, so it's not the beautiful finished edition, but The Lost Man by Jane Harper. So Jane Harper wrote The Dry. She's an Australian author. The Dry was the first of a series with Aaron Falk, a police detective in a drought-stricken town in Australia, in country Victoria. This is a standalone. This is her 3rd book. It's a standalone, so it's not an Aaron Falk book, and it's set in remote outback Australia near the desert, and it's really hot. It's coming up to Christmas, and Nathan finds that his brother Cameron has died, and it looks like a suicide because he's walked to a part of the outback where you wouldn't survive longer than 24 hours without hat and water and things like that. So Nathan investigates, and he's home with the extended family for Christmas in Cameron's house, which is sort of a big homestead. And it starts slowly, but then the tension builds and builds, and you get to know the members of the family, and they all have secrets, and nothing is quite as it seems. And she's very good with atmosphere, and the fact that they're in the middle of nowhere. So the nearest house, so Nathan lives next door, but his house is 3 hours drive away. So it's really eerie, and in a sense it's like a locked room mystery because they're so isolated. So I really recommend this. I think it's better than The Dry. If you've read that, I think this is better. And yeah, a really gripping read, and very, very apt for summer. Or if you're in winter and you want to feel like you're in the middle of a hot desert, if that's going to warm you up, this would be a good one. So that's The Lost Man by Jane Harper. And still in Australia, this is just a wonderful book, Boy Swallows Universe by Trent Dalton. It's his debut novel. He's a journalist and writes really vivid, colourful pieces in his journalism, but this is a novel that's partly based on his life. He grew up in the outer suburbs of Brisbane, and the story, there are two brothers, Eli, the narrator, and his brother August, and Trent Dalton actually has, I think he's one of 4 boys, but he's sort of whittled it down and really focused the story on these 2 brothers, and so it's loosely drawn from his life, but he says it's 50-50, but really fascinating because his mother he lived with, and his stepfather was a drug dealer basically in suburban Brisbane, and then so he gets to meet all these interesting characters. There's a Vietnamese family down the road who are sort of involved in the trade, and they have a restaurant and they go there for their family dinners. And then his brother is a really interesting sort of enigmatic character who doesn't speak, and that story develops over the course of the novel. And then their father comes back into their life as well. Their mother goes to prison, so he actually tries to help his mother when she's in prison. So there are all sorts of escapades. It's what I loved about this was the tone is very warm and enthusiastic and lively, and the narrator Eli is just such a lively character, and so you warm to him immediately, and it's just full of colour. It's really vivid, and it feels very honest, and it just draws a picture of suburban Australian life in the 1980s that you feel as if you're there. So a really accomplished book, and I think it's a great summer read because it's very engaging, and it's an easy read, but there's a lot in there to think about. So that's Boy Swallows Universe. And then the last one, we're travelling again, and this is The End by Fernanda Torres, translated by Alison Entrekin. And Fernanda Torres is a Brazilian author. She's also an actor. I think she's won a few awards at Cannes, and so highly regarded. And I found that she was really good at sort of drawing a scene, and I think maybe that comes from acting. And I know quite a few actors do cross over into writing, and it's interesting seeing how the parallels between those professions, because I think inhabiting another character and having an eye for a dramatic scene. And this is 5 older men in Rio de Janeiro who are facing their mortality. So you hear from each of them, you get their different points of view, and they look back on their lives when they were on the town in Rio, causing trouble, partying hard and playing beach volleyball and all of that. There's a lot of partying, and now they're grumpy old men, for want of a better term, and they are each finding it hard facing up to their coming deaths, and even the idea of their friendship has sort of wavered, and they don't find it easy to just communicate with each other in an honest way. It's always been sort of bravado and braggadocio, or whatever the word is, and it's been a lot of swagger, but now it changes as you get older, I suppose. So it's a really fun read. Initially I found it, that they're very wrong, they're sexist and they say all sorts of politically incorrect things, and initially I found that I didn't know if I liked it, but it actually is. I think it's honest is one thing. It's probably really well observed, but also it's just with a sense of fun. So I actually just ended up loving it because I read it just with it's a light-hearted approach, I think, that she's taken, and so I really enjoyed it, and it's very much a beach read or a summer read. So that's The End by Fernanda Torres, and I will do another video with my summer TBR of the books that I'll be planning to read this summer, and I'll be keen to hear if you have any recommendations, or indeed if you're reading winter books, let me know, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.